Welcome, everybody. This is Denny with Why Is This True? And today we're going to continue the channeling series with Karl Mollison from TeamArchangel.com. And today we're going to channel Max Spiers, who was, by some accounts, he was called a conspiracy theorist from the UK. But of course, there's a lot more to Max Spiers that we're going to find out about. Of course, at the introduction, there'll be a short bio, which you've already seen. And I'm not going to read a bio today because we have a long session ahead of us. There's 10 questions. And at this point, I would like to invite Karl to give us a little introduction about channeling and about what we're going to be doing today. So thanks again, Karl, for joining me. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Denny, and thanks to all of you who are watching. You're why we're doing this. We're not doing it for us. We're doing it for you. We're trying to help people wake up and see what is truly happening in the world. And the kind of people who come to sites like this and Denny's work are the people who aren't subjugated so totally they're beyond being able to respond to messages of truth. They will not respond to them. They will not hear them. They won't even process the idea of it. It'll just bing, bounce off like it's a foreign language. That's mind control manipulation. There's huge manipulation of everyone going on. We're all subjected to it. We're all bombarded by it because it's a carrier wave that goes through everything on the internet, everything in the media. So I don't want to get into a big, long discussion about that, but there's a reason people are complacent. And there's a reason for all the disinformation and the confusion of ideas and theories and plots and speculations. The very term conspiracy theorist was invented by the CIA to discredit people who raise uncomfortable questions about oddities happening and not being persuaded by a simplistic explanation. And the reason they were raising the questions is not that they were some kind of oddball, is that they were the odd man out because they were escaping the propaganda manipulation and the complacency. And so they were ones more close to the truth than not. I've seen this time and again when I probed into things that seemed really strange and found that they were true when I asked the light. So let's talk about channeling a little bit. This is a divinely guided process that I do. Not everyone works in this way. In fact, almost no one works in this way, even if they're reaching out to a divine being. And I say that because most channelers don't really reach those divine beings. They have aimed too low. They have been misled somewhere early along in what they do, and they've ended up talking to an imposter. Once that happens, the divine realm has to stand aside. People are continually amazed at that. Why would Archangel Michael allow someone to do false channelings of Archangel Michael? It's because we have free will and free agency, totally. It's 100% gift to us to have this be our kingdom. We can invite divine help and assistance, and this is what people think they do when they channel those beings. But if an imposter jumps in between and starts talking first, the divine realm has to let that stand because everyone has free will and free agency, the good, the bad, the ugly. It's the way it's set up. This is a place of duality. There are many variations of people and entities with varying agendas. A lot of negativity, a lot of trying to acquire power and manipulate others and so on. So we're in a struggle with dark forces here. And this is a test of us. Who is going to prevail? We would like to think it's us, but that's not certain yet. We have to make that happen. The divine realm is watching and waiting. When you reach out to the light, they will answer, but they can't answer effectively if someone jumps in the way first. Most people don't even think about safety when they set about doing an intuitive outreach. And this gets them into trouble. So this has influenced most such messengers. So the channelings people are used to hearing and watching are almost totally false channelings. That's just the way it is. I'm sorry. I don't like this being the way that it is. I'm not doing it to try to make myself look special. It makes me the oddball. Think about it. If I went along with the crowd, I'd just be who I say I am. And, if you like me, you don't like what I say, well, whatever. It just makes me look bad to point fingers at others. I don't like doing that, and I don't go out of my way to do it. But it's a fact we need to be aware of. So to explain myself and what I am doing and what it looks like, I have to kind of put it in the context of that broader world out there and why I might see things different and why I might get different kinds of messages and why I go about it in a way that looks different than what you might be used to. That's one of the reasons. You may never have seen an authentic channeling. I don't know. There are not too many people who are truly doing what they think they're doing. They're mostly sincere. That's not the problem. It's not their sincerity. It's whether they fall into the wrong hands. So it's a lot like life. There are a lot of false leaders and false philosophies and tenets and government systems and national identities that end up in tragedy for people. And they're just doing what they think is best for them. So the difference in a channeling through the divine, which is how I do it through Creator. Creator connects me to my target. So I don't need to know or worry about where they are, what they're doing, any other factor. Creator sets up that connection, and I first set up safety around the work so that I am protected and who I'm trying to reach is protected, and anyone involved with me or watching or assisting is protected. And then I work through Creator to set this in place. And what it is a kind of instrument. It's like a universal translator that Creator sets up to be the pipeline between me and my target. This allows me to channel someone who doesn't know English, my native tongue. It could be an animal, it could be a plant, it could be some other form of energy, but I can channel it. And the reason is this magic translator. Now, what it does is to put things into my vernacular. So English will come out of my mouth because that's what I speak. I will not channel in a foreign language because I'm talking to someone from France or Germany or what have you. In the same way that it translates things into my native tongue, it also can follow my vocabulary and my personal idioms, the phrases I might use to express an idea. Because the information comes through as the intention of the speaker, more so than exactly what they're saying and why, and how they might be constructing it in their consciousness. And that's particularly true of beings in the light. When we go back to the light, we go back to who we really are, and we drop the appearance we had when we were in the earth plane. We drop our cultural accoutrements and our habits and our personality idiosyncrasies that might have been shaped by that particular life. So people in the light are going to think and be different than they were as you might have known them in their earthly existence. So that's a component of this as well. So when it comes through me, it's colored by how I think to some extent, and the phrases and descriptions I might use, the very wording. I have a larger, perhaps than average vocabulary, so I might throw in certain words because they're convenient to the channeling process, right, and understandable by me. but not necessarily seem like the person that I'm speaking with as remembered in their earthly existence, if you follow what I'm saying. So like if I'm handling a child, they'll speak as an adult because they're back in adult mode now. They're not a little kid in the light. They're an adult in the light of long, long standing and deep, deep history. They weren't just newly minted as a soul for that life. They may have existed for eons. So they're not going to talk like a little child. They'll come through as a more worldly informed, higher level being. So the other thing you need to keep in mind is there are very, very strict rules about a light being interacting with us down here. They cannot take the lead. They cannot act on a personal agenda of any kind. They have to wait to be asked for information. And the way that question is phrased and the intention behind it will totally govern what comes back as a reply. So if there are things we're wondering about and inquiring about, they may be able to speak to that, but they can't reveal anything beyond the outlines of what we've already conceived. That would be taking the lead, you see. So if you're wondering about a mysterious death, and you go in this as your first time out of the block, and you happen to get a channeler who can reach the light, the being of the light is not going to tell you, well, I was killed because this is part of a cover-up of a government conspiracy, because I happen to be working for the government doing clandestine work, and it involved extraterrestrials, and there is a whole big program going on that I was brought in and informed about. They're not allowed to tell you that unless you already know the general outlines and are wondering if that had something to do with the death. So in the same way, when Denny and I go out and probe things that we may wonder and are part of the current thinking and speculation about some of these broad issues, the light will be able to reflect back to us information pertaining to what we ask and how we ask it. But they're not going to take us to a huge new revelation about broader, deeper aspects of it, unless we're smart enough to have already started to conceive that. That puts a huge burden on us still, and it will limit what comes forward. It would be wonderful if they didn't have these handcuffs, but they do. So the fact we can't just go and talk to anybody in the light who's had anything to do with this and have them come and give us an encyclopedic knowledge of everything that's happened and why and who was doing it and what are they up to and what's going to happen next and so on. That would be wonderful. We'd all love to see that. But that will not happen. In the same way, if you talk to Creator will not give you a detailed account of your life, where it's going, what's going to happen, everything about you and everyone around you, and the bigger picture, and what the stock market's going to do 6 months from now, and on and on and on. Because that's taking the lead. That's spilling all the beans. And it destroys the experiment. The experiment is to let us figure out how to advance in the face of adversity. We brought some of this adversity on ourselves through long past history of dabbling with what it means to be off track, getting power in unhealthy ways, and so on. And that has attracted to us a group of beings who were on this path before us and have not done very well. And they've reached very, very low levels of spiritual awareness through a disconnection. And they've been corrupted by dark spirits to get them into that quandary. That's happened to us. And now these other beings are here in the earth plane, the extraterrestrials. And they're working actually in concert with the dark spirits. This is how bad it's gotten. So we've had to figure this out ourselves. The divine realm will tip you off if you come and ask directly what's going on with this and what is driving it and who is really making this happen. And you have to be thorough and relentless and kind of earn your way along to get that information.
Right.
You have
Karl,
smart and insightful enough to go in the right direction, and then you'll get the rewarding. So the end result of this is there will be a sameness in what comes forward from everyone we talk to. And it's because they're only building on the foundation already laid. They can't take us in some new radical direction. They can't suddenly open up the agenda, something they'd like to see. Well, I was working for company X and we were heavy into, secret weapons development. And you really should look into that because these things are really devastating and deadly and you should know about it. And this sort of thing. They can't do that.
Well, the other issue I want to point out, I think you kind of alluded to this, but there's the karmic entanglement issue and there's also the safety issue. So they're not going to tell us something that's going to get us in trouble or get us killed. For generally speaking, that's true. They know, where the line is around those issues. And the other thing is that they're not going to be talking about stuff to make a bad situation worse, which you've termed as karmic entanglement.
Yes.
So those are other issues that come into play here.
Those are very real constraints, and they're very concerned about not overstepping those boundaries. And another concern that is a very key one, and it applies to people doing divine channeling, going through divine beings in the proper way. They cannot offer proof of the reality of the divine. They cannot prove to you heaven is real by, for example, rattling off to me as a channeler tons of little detailed minutia that I could not possibly have known. I couldn't find it on the internet anywhere, and I could not have learned it from anyone in particular, but it's something that they know. And, if you go in the backyard of my house I had in Pittsburgh in 1955, you'll find a bottle buried under this elm tree, and it's got my prediction of the future in it. This kind of thing.
Right.
The big reveal that's with definitive proof.
Right.
That would bring the harshest skeptics to their knees. You see, they are forbidden from doing that. It's frustrating, believe me. I mean, I've always been wanting to get that sort of thing myself, but it was naive.
Right.
Because it destroys, it circumvents, it short circuits.
Yeah.
This testing of us.
Well, it's funny because it's actually a very ancient story that's told in the Bible. I think it's in the New Testament. I think it's in one. I should know this. I should be able to rattle this off, and I probably could at one time. But there's a story about Jesus being confronted on this very issue, and he talks about how he could lay out all these miracles for everybody, and there's still people who would not believe, even if the miracles were laid right at their feet, and they were irrefutable, and they were obvious, and everyone else around them could see it. The skeptics. There is a belief system behind the skeptics' state of affairs, so to speak, or worldview. So in effect, that's for the light being, violating the skeptic's belief system is actually creating a karmic entanglement, or like you say, taking the lead. So ultimately it doesn't really serve anything, because if somebody wants to not believe, that's their choice. Yes. And that's kind of, that's very unsatisfying for a lot of people that call themselves researchers and, critical thinkers, because that kind of runs counter to what they would like to hear about this whole issue. They would like to think like, well, just give us the proof and then we can get on with the show here. And it's a problem. If you're talking about a free will experiment, well, that approach causes problems that aren't easily overcome. Yeah.
So one of the metaphors that just popped into my head that has been pointed out to me, it's sort of like if you're in a race and you're starting to flag because it's tough and you're you're weakening. If somebody comes and gives you a motor scooter and you win the race, how does that really truly help you? Because it's a false victory. It isn't your victory anymore. And this was told to me in the context of one of the scenarios we hear a lot these days, that the benevolent ETs are going to come in and save us. The problem with that theory is it's given us a motor scooter to use for that last lap, and then it won't be our race anymore. And we won't have proved our mettle. We won't have overcome the challenges that we're facing. And the test of us is to see, can we do this on our own? And what is needed is coming back to having faith in the divine after a period of disconnection. That's the big picture going on here. It's not good ETs versus bad ETs. It's humans drifting away from an awareness of God and finding their way back. That's why the test of faith is critical. If God wanted to prove its existence and the existence of heaven, it would be a piece of cake. That's not God's agenda. God's agenda is to see, are we going to stick to belief in the divine, or are we going to be seduced away by ego, thinking we can do this all ourselves and we don't need God, and maybe it's not even real, and we are misled by so many leaders and prophets and gurus and proponents and big thinkers and extraterrestrial and spirit corruption to take us away from our inner spirituality. That is our origin, and that is our anchor. So that's why we're not going to get this handed to us in a big splash kind of way, in a dramatic, incontrovertible way, because that short circuits the test for each and every one of us to find faith in our own fashion, on our own, with maybe some encouragement, but not a certainty. It's not hard to believe in what's certain. Anybody can do that. That doesn't require anything of you other than, basic intelligence, common sense. What's hard is dealing with negativity and sorting out the wheat from the chaff and conducting yourself in a way that's true to divine principles so you don't create problems for yourself for the future. And that's what's brought this big mess. We've gotten out of alignment too many times, and it builds up and builds up and builds up. And now we have a major dilemma on our hands with outside interference. So it's like we've been taken over by the mafia, and they do it in a very subtle way, largely hidden. But they're corrupting everything. They're corrupting the young, they're corrupting the churches, they're corrupting all our institutions and the governments and so on. We have to find a way back to that truth of how to be divine again. Right. And we can do it each in our own way, and that will save each and every one of us individually. But the collective experiment is what's at risk. We can't just tend to ourselves. We need to help the greater collective of humanity also. Otherwise, the divine experiment will fail. We'll be back as light beings. Our souls are immortal. We're not in danger of being destroyed. We're in danger of having this experiment in free will come to a bad end.
Right. Okay, with that, Karl, I think we might want to get started because we have a long stint ahead of us. There's 10 questions for Max Spiers. I think that's it. I guess I don't have any more to say about it. We'll talk to Max. He'll fill us in.
Okay. Well, just give me a moment to get in the right level of consciousness and set up the safety around the work. And then he will announce he's here. And then it's all up to you and your questions.
Okay. Great.
So you can blame this on Denny.
Yes, I'll take the blame.
Okay. This is Max Spiers speaking.
Thank you for joining us, Max. Is it true that you were murdered? And if so, was the perpetrator or perpetrators human or non-human? And is this being and or being still incarnated? And if not, do they need a spirit rescue?
You are going right to the heart of things with this first question. So we will do our best to honor you and honor your inquiry as a whole by being as forthright as we can within the limits placed on us. So we can tell you that our death was unnatural and was not self-inflicted. I did indeed have my issues and problems, both. But this was inflicted on me by outside parties. I cannot give you the names and mechanism because that would be leaping ahead and giving you forensic evidence that is not our place. But we can tell you with certainty that if the powers that be did not want me dead, I would no longer be deceased. I would still be living and proceeding with my life. So this was a targeted killing. It was done by human agents, but human agents working for the extraterrestrial alliance that wishes to keep its dark doings hidden. So this indeed was a conspiracy with multiple participants and for a very large agenda working against humanity. And not to say I was so very important, but I would turn this around for those skeptics seeing this as a grandiose proclamation that is wildly ludicrous on its face and could only be, even with a legitimate channeling, the inflated ego of someone who was unbalanced with delusions of grandeur or a messianic vision of their self-importance. I would turn this around and say, if someone like myself on the fringes of the world stage with relatively little power or visibility to affect anything or anyone other than having some intense curiosity about the unusual and occasionally coming forward to share my observations. If someone like me can be targeted for elimination, it could only be that there are huge, huge forces at work, because there are certainly many, many others of greater risk to the deep state, the deep hidden hand running the world. This we intend to be sobering because it is the number one agenda that needs to be in everyone's awareness, because the stakes are high and growing higher every day.
Okay, thank you. What was the most sensitive information that you were revealing towards the end of your life as Max Spiers? And what was the real issue they did not want you talking about publicly?